ever heard of a pig standing trial for murder? Can you imagine a woman being prosecuted alongside a family of rats? The Middle Ages were wild y'all. Number 7. The Vengeful Sow of Savigny. Did animals have criminal intent in medieval times? The courts certainly thought so. In 1457, in the French village of Savigny, a mother sow and her 6 piglets were arrested and jailed on serious charges. Their crime? The gruesome murder of a 5-year-old boy named Jehan Martin. According to court records, the sow had attacked the child and the piglets joined in, resulting in the boy's death. The villagers captured the porcine family and held an actual trial. While this might sound bizarre to our modern ears, animal trials were surprisingly common in medieval Europe. The court appointed a lawyer for the sow, provided witnesses, and followed proper legal procedures. The trial lasted nearly a month, with the court taking testimonies from villagers who had witnessed the attack. The mother pig was eventually found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. The judge appeared in full ceremonial robes for the execution, which was carried out by the local hangman. He even received his usual payment for the job. The fate of the 6 piglets became a matter of heated debate. Some villagers demanded they face the same punishment as their mother, arguing that they had blood on their snouts and were clearly accomplices to the crime. Others defended the piglets, claiming they were young, under the influence of their mother, and therefore not responsible for their actions. After much deliberation, the court released the piglets due to lack of evidence and their youth. Some accounts suggest a local nobleman vouched for their character, promising they would be raised properly and not follow in their mother's criminal footsteps. The execution was a public spectacle, with the sow dressed in human clothes before being hanged. Records show the village paid for new gloves for the executioner. Apparently, hanging a pig was considered dirty work even for a hangman. Number 6. The woman who married a dog. Can humans legally marry animals? One court had to decide exactly that. In the late 14th century, an unnamed woman from Avignon faced serious charges of bestiality after neighbors reported her unusual relationship with her dog. The court records describe a ceremony of matrimony the woman allegedly performed, declaring the dog her husband. When brought before the court, the woman didn't deny her actions but offered an explanation that stunned the judges. She claimed that, after being widowed, she had prayed to Saint Guinefort, ironically a saint represented as a dog in some regions, for protection. She interpreted a dream as instructions to take a canine protector in matrimony to ward off evil spirits. What makes this case particularly fascinating is how seriously the court took the matter. Bestiality was typically punishable by death in medieval times, often by burning at the stake alongside the animal involved. However, this case became complicated because the woman insisted no physical relations had occurred. She simply believed she was married to the dog in a spiritual sense. The local priest testified that the woman had always been devout, attending Mass regularly and giving generously to the church. Several neighbors spoke of her kindness and how she had helped care for sick children in the village. After considerable deliberation, the court decided not to execute the woman. Instead, they declared her touched in the mind and sentenced her to life in a convent, where she could receive prayers and healing. The dog was removed from her possession, but, unusually for such cases, was not killed. Records indicate it was given to a local shepherd. The case remained controversial for years, with some clerics using it as an example of female madness, while others viewed it as a cautionary tale about misinterpreting religious visions. Some modern historians suggest the woman may have simply been an isolated widow who found comfort in her pet, with the marriage allegation being exaggerated by suspicious neighbors. Number 5. The weaver and the weevils. How do you cross-examine an insect? One court actually tried, in 1478, in the Swiss town of Bern, a peculiar case came before the local magistrate. A woman named Greta, a respected weaver, brought charges against the weevils that had infested her stored grain and wool supplies, threatening her livelihood. Unlike some animal trials that were clearly meant as entertainment or moral lessons, this case shows how seriously such proceedings could be taken. The court appointed a defense attorney for the weevils, who argued passionately on their behalf. Court records show he claimed the insects were simply God's creatures seeking sustenance and had as much right to the grain as humans did. Greta represented herself, bringing samples of her damaged goods and providing testimony about how the infestation threatened to bankrupt her small weaving business. As a widow supporting 3 children, she argued that the weevils had targeted her specifically and maliciously. The case dragged on for over 2 weeks, with witnesses called to testify about the extent of the damage and the character of both Greta and the weevil population. One fascinating aspect of the trial was the serious theological debate that ensued. The defense attorney cited biblical passages suggesting that insects were part of God's creation and fulfilling their divine purpose, Greta countered, with scriptures about the importance of honest labor and protection of one's family, arguing that the weevils had many other sources of food and had chosen to attack her stores out of greed. In a surprising verdict, the court ruled partially in Greta's favor. They declared that the weevils must leave her property, but allocated a small field at the edge of town where the insects would be permitted to live undisturbed. The court even issued an official document granting the weevils rights to this land in perpetuity. What's truly remarkable is that historical records indicate Greta's infestation problems did indeed improve after the trial. Whether this was due to natural causes, improved storage methods she implemented during the proceedings, or as some villagers believed, the weevils actually respecting the court's decision, remains one of history's small mysteries. Number 4. The midwife and the murderous rooster. Could a rooster be possessed by evil spirits? One medieval court thought it possible. In 1474, in the small Swiss town of Basel, a rooster was put on trial for the unusual crime of laying an egg. According to medieval belief, a rooster's egg would hatch into a creature called a cockatrice, a mythical beast with the power to kill with a single glance. What makes this case especially interesting is the involvement of Magdalena, the town's midwife. She discovered the alleged egg-laying rooster while visiting a farm to deliver a baby. After the birth, she noticed the strange behavior of the farmer's rooster and claimed to witness it produce a small, malformed egg. Instead of dismissing her story, the town authorities arrested both the rooster and Magdalena. The charges against the rooster were straightforward: laying an egg that could produce a devastating monster. The midwife faced more complex accusations, including witchcraft and conspiracy, with the rooster to bring calamity to the town. During the trial, witnesses testified about the rooster's unusual behavior, claiming it had crowed at midnight for several nights, considered a bad omen, and had stopped fighting with other roosters, instead spending time alone in dark corners of the barn. Magdalena defended herself vigorously, arguing that she had immediately reported the incident rather than hiding it, which a witch would have done. She brought character witnesses who spoke of her successful deliveries and healing work in the community. Her knowledge of folk remedies and herb lore, she insisted, was passed down by her grandmother and used only for good. The court deliberated for days, consulting with clergymen about the theological implications. Eventually, they reached a verdict. The rooster was found guilty and sentenced to be burned at the stake. Record books show the execution was carried out in the town square, with the alleged egg burned alongside the unfortunate bird. Magdalena's fate hung in the balance longer. Some judges remained suspicious of her involvement, particularly because she had been present at the scene. However, testimony from the priest about her regular attendance at Mass and from mothers she had helped finally swayed the court. She was declared innocent of witchcraft, but was ordered to undergo ritual purification and to attend special prayer services for a year. The case was referenced for decades afterward in the region, often cited in sermons as evidence of how evil could manifest in unexpected ways. For Magdalena, though records show she continued her work as a midwife, some accounts suggest she never again entered the chicken coop for the rest of her life. Number 3, the beekeeper's wife and her accused bees. What happens when your livelihood is put on trial? One woman had to defend her entire bee colony. In 1446, in a village near Lyon, France, a tragedy occurred when 3 children died after being stung multiple times by bees. The bereaved parents demanded justice, bringing charges against both the bee colony and its owner, Beatrice, the local beekeeper's wife, who had inherited the hives after her husband's death. This case stands out because it combined both animal prosecution and female property rights, 2 areas where medieval courts often revealed their biases. When brought before the magistrate, Beatrice faced not only the accusation that her bees were murderous, but also questions about whether a woman could properly control such potentially dangerous creatures. The prosecution argued that the bees had acted with malice, leaving their hives specifically to attack the children who were playing nearby. They brought witnesses who claimed the bees had behaved strangely in recent weeks, producing darker honey and swarming in unusual patterns, all signs they suggested of evil intentions. Beatrice defended both herself and her bees with surprising effectiveness. Court records show she brought samples of her honey to demonstrate its normal quality and color. She explained the natural behavior of bees during different seasons and weather conditions. Most importantly, she revealed that the children had been throwing stones at the hives before the attack, a fact confirmed by a reluctant neighbor. The judge, apparently more knowledgeable than many of his contemporaries, recognized the provocation factor. In a nuanced verdict, he declared the bees had acted in self-defense and were therefore not guilty of murder. However, he ordered Beatrice to move her hives further from common pathways and to build a higher wall around them. The case took an interesting turn when some villagers still demanded punishment, suggesting the tragic deaths required retribution regardless of provocation. The judge then ordered a compromise that reveals much about medieval justice. While the bee colony as a whole was exonerated, 3 individual bees, the supposed ringleaders, were captured and ceremonially killed by drowning. For Beatrice, the trial actually improved her standing in the community. Records show her honey business thrived afterward, with some accounts suggesting the famous trial honey was sought after by people from neighboring villages. The case became a reference point in the region for discussing animal responsibility and the balance between justice and practicality. Number 2. The rat family of Autun. Could rats receive a fair trial? One French court insisted they could. One of the most thoroughly documented animal trials took place in Autun, France, in 1522. The defendants were the rats of the province, charged with feloniously eating and destroying the barley crops of the region. What makes this case extraordinary is the involvement of a woman named Isabeau, who claimed she could communicate with the rodents. When local farmers brought their complaints to court, demanding action against the rat infestation, the judge appointed a well-known lawyer, Bartholomew Chassigny, to represent the rats. Chassigny took his role seriously and became famous for his creative defense arguments. Isabeau entered the story when she approached the court, claiming to have special knowledge. She testified that the rats were actually a family that had lived in the region for generations and had only turned to eating crops because villagers had killed the cats that kept the rat population in check. More controversially, she claimed she could negotiate directly with the rat leaders. Initially viewed with suspicion, Isabeau avoided witchcraft accusations by carefully framing her communication as interpretation of animal behavior rather than supernatural ability. She brought evidence showing how the villagers had indeed engaged in a cull of feral cats the previous year due to their own superstitious beliefs. Savigny worked alongside Isabeau, using her insights to build his defense. First, he argued that a proper summons had not been served to each individual rat. When the court issued a general summons read aloud in each parish, Savigny then argued his clients could not appear safely due to the many cats and rat traps along the way. The proceedings lasted nearly 3 months, with Isabeau playing an increasingly central role. Records indicate she set up elaborate displays in court, showing rats' natural behavior and diet preferences, effectively demonstrating that they preferred other foods to barley when given the choice. The case concluded with a compromise judgment. The rats were ordered to leave the fields within 2 weeks or face excommunication, a serious spiritual penalty even for rodents in medieval thinking. However, the court also mandated that the farmers provide alternative food sources at the forest edge and stop killing cats within the village. Isabeau's reputation changed dramatically through the trial. Initially viewed as strange, court records show she received payments for her rat knowledge from the judicial funds. After the case, several accounts mention her being consulted on pest control throughout the region, effectively turning her unusual skills into a respectable profession. Fascinatingly, historical records note that the rat problem did diminish in subsequent seasons. Whether this was due to natural cycles, increased cat populations, or as some villagers believed, the rats respecting the court's decision after Isabeau's negotiations, remains one of history's curious mysteries. Number 1. The lioness of Navarre. Can a wild animal belong to a woman? One queen's strange legal battle changed history. In 1365, in the Kingdom of Navarre, Queen Joanna became embroiled in one of the strangest legal disputes in medieval history. The case centered around a lioness that had been gifted to her by an Egyptian diplomat seeking trade agreements. The lioness, named Aziza, was kept in a specially constructed enclosure in the royal gardens and became something of a sensation, with visitors traveling great distances to view the exotic animal. Queen Joanna became particularly attached to Aziza, often spending hours observing her and feeding her specially prepared meats. The court case erupted when the lioness escaped and killed 2 hunting dogs belonging to a powerful nobleman, Count Raymond. Rather than demanding compensation directly from the queen, which would have been politically delicate, Count Raymond brought charges against the lioness herself, claiming she was an instrument of Satan that had deliberately targeted his prized hound. Queen Joanna, refusing to see her beloved lioness, declared evil or put to death, took the unprecedented step of appointing herself as Aziza's defender in court. This created a complex legal situation, a queen appearing in her own royal court to defend an animal. The trial records reveal the surprising sophistication of medieval legal thinking. Count Raymond's representatives argued that the lioness had shown malicious intent by ignoring easier prey, chickens and smaller animals, to specifically attack the count's dogs. They brought witnesses who claimed the lioness had roared in a triumphant manner after the killings. Queen Joanna countered with testimony from natural philosophers who had studied animal behavior. They explained that lions were natural predators of canine species in their homeland, and that Aziza was merely following her instincts. Joanna also personally testified about the lioness's gentle behavior toward humans, even bringing a young lion tamer from Alexandria who entered Aziza's cage and demonstrated her responsiveness to commands. The case became increasingly political, with nobles taking sides based largely on their allegiance to either the Queen or Count Raymond. After weeks of testimony, the royal court delivered a carefully balanced verdict. Aziza was declared not evil, but was recognized as dangerous by nature. Queen Joanna was ordered to strengthen the lioness's enclosure and pay compensation for the dogs, not as punishment, but as acknowledgement of the damage caused by her property. The most lasting impact of this unusual case was the legal precedent it established. The verdict effectively created one of the first formal distinctions between criminal intent and natural behavior in animals. It also reinforced the concept that animal owners were responsible for damages caused by their animals even without negligence, a principle that remains in many legal systems today. For Queen Joanna, the case actually strengthened her political position, demonstrating her learning and commitment to justice even when her personal interests were involved. Records show Aziza lived another 8 years in the royal menagerie, and upon her death received a formal burial in the royal gardens, perhaps the only lioness in medieval Europe to be so honored. Did these strange medieval court cases involving animals and women help shape our modern legal system? Could these seemingly bizarre proceedings have actually established important principles about responsibility, property, and natural behavior that we still rely on today